this is obviously the big thing in the future with the Internet of Things. That's what's going to happen. They know what clothes you're wearing, how many kilometers you walk in your shoes. Basically, determine when you should buy new shoes. That's what's going to happen. That's going to be a big play of that.
Okay. Okay. So basically, like, the panel was supposed to be on the future of payments in Southeast Asia. Let's get everyone's favorite topic out of the way: regulations. Okay. So most of these payment providers here, you guys all want to be like regional players, right? And some of you are already like regionalizing. So for example, like Donnie was saying that they're in Japan and Thailand right now, and then they're going to go to Indonesia, Singapore, and one other country. And we're seeing like there are different like governments are taking different approaches to regulations. For example, like your country, Thailand, you guys just nationalized your e-payments, the wallet and stuff. What trends do you think we're going to be seeing in terms of what governments are going to be pushing out for regulations? What's going to be friendly? What's not going to be friendly? Punnamas, do you want to start first?
Sure. So since we operate in 6 countries throughout Southeast Asia, besides Thailand, we in Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. And in every country, we work with regulator. So the fintech you cannot avoid, and you should not avoid regulator, because there are some real concerns. So you got to understand what's the regulator objective, right? Regulator usually have 2 objectives. One is to promote, the other one is to regulate, right? And why do they regulate? Because there are systematic risks that can cause a lot of risk to consumers and businesses. So the way that you got to work with operator is to understand their needs and operate within the framework of the regulations, and then work with the departments that will promote and try to consult. The most regulators that we work with, Thailand is more advanced than other countries. It's very open-minded, right? But you got to understand the objective. Objective of regulators, besides protection of systematic risk, financial inclusion, traceability, lower cost of fund. Usually those are the top 3 or 4 objectives of every regulator. So the way that we see things are happening and moving forward is that regulators tend to be more open, especially to those players that want to be open up to them as well. But at the same time, regulators will be more strict for those that want to get around the regulator. And I would not recommend getting around regulator. We'll consult with them.
Gotcha. And Donnie, so with your international expansion, what kind of like challenges have you guys faced with regulations?
Well, wasn't a good experience for us.
You want to share some stories here?
Like for Thailand, we are actually regulated under like a Bank of Thailand, and they're pretty old school. And
I know someone from the Bank of Thailand.
Well, our infrastructure is actually built on cloud, right? I mean, when we applied our license and we showed our architecture and whatever that's built in cloud, I mean, for them, cloud is like sharing resources. Is it secure? I mean, it doesn't sound secure to them. So we had to convince them that our cloud provider is actually a provider for like big financial institutions like in the world, like for example, Singapore Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, NASA, CIA. We had to fly in engineers from the States and also the legal team to come and sit down and talk to BOT and educate them. But in the end, we finally got a license, and we are still the first and the only payment gateway in Thailand to apply for this license with cloud.
That's cool. So compared to Southeast Asia, you guys are also in Japan. Did you find that easier?
Japan, well, e-payment is not regulated that strictly, like compared to Thailand or Indonesia. Indonesia is a different animal too. I mean, to be honest, I mean, Bank of Indonesia, I mean,
their new data regulations. Are you guys facing any problems in setting up there?
In Thailand, BOT has very clear regulations, but in Indonesia, it's everything's gray. I was like, can we actually do this? We're not really sure. Can we actually do this?
So you're gonna ask for forgiveness rather than permission?
Yeah,
is that your approach?
So Indonesia is more like, if you want to do business in Indonesia, it's more like know who, not know how. So we've got banks backing us up in Indonesia. That's how we actually survive in Indonesia.
And that's another way as well, that if regulation is not clear, work with bank first, right? Because remember, as a regulator, they know banks very well. They regulate banks strictly, and for good reasons too, right? So you work with someone who a regulator do feel comfortable with, and propose framework that regulator can be comfortable. And usually what we do is for new innovations, we work with banks and do back-to-back liability, right? So banks feel comfortable, the regulator feel comfortable that bank will be responsible, and bank can take us liable for that too. So that's another way.
I have a question. How long did it take to get a license in Thailand?
Well, in Thailand, we got licensed. We got licensed since 8 years ago. So Thailand is very straightforward. Yeah, but Indonesia, huh?
6 months. Application in Thai or applications in English?
Actually, it doesn't take more than 2 months. But in our case, it was something really new, so we had to keep on like educate, like BOT, clarify everything. But in the end, it was actually a good result because
You got an e-wallet license or a payment gateway license?
it's actually it's a payment gateway.
It's
We call it e-money or tree. Yeah.
What I have seen, I mean, in the past, last 10 years, payments and RBI, the way the shift has happened, if you've seen the last 10 to 12 years, the regulators are themselves waiting for people to push the envelope, and they adapt. And I've seen a lot of faster adaptation and adoption in regulation. Case in point in Singapore is, I think they've put up a fintech a fund. I think they're going all around town, and there's going to be a fintech conference.
Sandbox.
Yeah, they're going to have and they're insisting the banks open APIs. So that's very Singapore. In India, they've got a common platform which is real-time settlement, which has been there for a while. So I think regulators are looking at things and looking at the future, how to get all the everybody backed. I think that's pretty much what they want, so that they can functionally regulate, and they all see that the digital spectrum, or I would say the push towards digital is happening. So what they hold off for is making sure that it conforms to what the society would require. So I mean, they're individuals, right? I met a lot of regulators. They're using the Facebooks. They were using all the channels which you're using, and they have youngsters who are very, very digitally savvy. And they're also looking at it from that perspective. It's just that they move a bit slower because there's a lot of political, things surrounding them, which takes a little bit longer.
So you feel like as long as companies started innovating, regulators would get used to it?
Absolutely. I mean, look at it in the last 10 years. Digital, everything has gone digital, and regulators have kept it up, right?
Okay.
They didn't have any money license in the past, and they went through the cycle and then put the documentation for every country has done that. One after another, they follow each other. I think regulators have their own huddle group between all the countries, right? So they must be having their own chats.
That's good. We were talking about like banks and how you guys work with banks. Do you feel like you're going to be cooperating with banks, or do you feel like your guys are disrupting banks?
Well, I think most area will cooperate, right? And some area will be disrupting. Remember, for bank population, the key source of fund is still with bank, right? You won't get around that. How do you get your payroll? You can do the bank. So you work with bank in getting the fund in and fund out effective for bank populations. And I think payment services, there's a lot of innovations that you can make on top, right? You see, and because banks have their own issues, slow IT, and banks people will tell you firsthand that they would rather work with a startup than work with internal IT. So actually, banks they have a split internal ideas as well. So do work with bank, but some area will be disrupting bank, right? For example, online payment. Banks want to do online payment, but the fact that bank being a bank, they cannot accept payment. Imagine if a bank wants to do payment gateway, which they do. How are they going to accept installment from another competitor bank? They won't, right? Or do bill payment. How are you going to accept bill payment from another bank credit cards? They won't. So there's absolutely great opportunities to be a neutral, and in fact, being a payment provider, you should be a neutral party as much as possible. But you do work with bank, and then you extend bank. Even for the lending, where is the source of money? Until you go to peer-to-peer, bank is your source of money. What's the problem with bank? Bank doesn't have credit rating scoring from the underbanked populations. So maybe a startup can do credit rating scoring for the underbanked and use and work with bank to lend it out.
And Francois.
Yes, obviously Visa, we work closely with banks, right? So we support what we call
You're also
the
saying that you were starting to work more with non-banks as well.
yeah, of course. So I think what I was trying to say is we work with banks and we support what we call the four-party model. So which means that basically we have one bank on one side who's working with the consumer and on the other side who's working building the merchant network. But increasingly, what we want to do is actually work with a fintech and also non-banks, non-traditional players. Like for instance, we've launched Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Android Pay in Singapore, and obviously there's a lot more collaboration coming. And I think what you're saying is exactly right? I think that the right partnership is when actually there is like a bank involved, there is like a non-financial institution. So you should work with bank rather than trying to own your own chain, the whole value chain. And that's actually the spirit of our new engagement, if you will. In the past we wanted to own the entire value chain of payment, and I think that's true with like every big company. But I think now we realize that what's important is actually the consumer experience. And obviously we have capabilities. The bank have the network, and you also have capabilities, and that's the way to actually open it.
And Danny, do banks hate you, or do you guys like work with them?
We like to love. We love to work with banks. Or like the PPA Punnamas is mentioning. So we actually disrupting the bank in some areas, and in some areas we also still need them. So we need to, keep the bond, which just kind of keep them out globally.
So as much as I want more time, we've only got like 3 minutes. So if anyone has a question, now's the time to jump in. So if not, I'm going to end it off with one final thing. So talking about mobile wallets. So for example, in China, we've seen adoption of it from say WeChat Pay or Alipay, and in India, we're seeing a little bit of adoption of it. Do you think Southeast Asia is going to get one of its own, and when and who do you think it's going to come from?
So
Francois?
can I have a crack at this?
Okay.
So yes, there's been a lot of success in China and India. We've seen it with Alipay, WeChat in China, Paytm in India. And actually, we see there is a lot of activity in Southeast Asia and in that space, in a QR code payment, mobile wallet. So no one yet has scaled like in China or in India. But we see, for instance, in Vietnam, some banks or fintech, like a Vietnam Bank, for instance, of Mocha, BCA in Indonesia with Sakuku, have started basically going into that space of QR code-based payment. We have ourselves actually gone live as well in India with M-Visa. So yeah, we don't know yet who's going to be the winner, but we can see clearly some activity in that space. And ourselves, we also want to be in that space, working with you and with our banks to basically use our capabilities to deploy this type of solutions.
Yeah. So we certainly hope that it will be us as a winner in Southeast Asia. But in all seriousness, we don't think Apple Pay or Google Pay or Samsung Pay will be the winner, because they still address the same population. They go after the same populations, the rural bank populations, the card populations. And we think that on a massive
scale. I
scale.
feel they're ignoring most of Southeast Asians actually.
Well, just the nature of the company, right? Apple iTunes still doesn't support anything beyond Visa, Master, and maybe Japanese carrier and Chinese carrier. So just the nature of running a company, being a multinational.
It's because they can't settle.
What's that?
They want the money back in Dublin.
Yeah, that could be too. Yeah, but the winner in Southeast Asia and most part of the world is the first persons that can crack the underbanked populations in a massive scale, right? That's I think going to be the winner.
So I have a view here. India has 44 wallets. So the front runner is Paytm because he's got huge amount of capital and he's spending money on brands. Wallets, the definition of wallets, as far as I'm concerned, wallet is not going to succeed. What is going to succeed is real-time direct debit payments. That means once the banks open up and they have a national network where you can actually do a direct debit, then you won't need a wallet, you will directly debit from the bank account. So that's the way things are going. In India, they have UPI, they started UPI. It's effectively, you don't need wallets, you can directly debit from the bank account. So you don't move money from your bank and put it into another wallet.
Okay.
That's the way, that's my opinion, that's how it's.
And you're also mentioning that the one thing that's going to make them succeed more than anything is like large, huge amounts of like capital.
So I mean, I have a viewpoint on the previous question, sorry. So the banks are,
You'll get your seat.
yeah, banks are there. Banks are not going to go away. What the challenge they have is they have the startup companies which are heavily funded, and they spend money on acquiring customers on PE funds. When I take an Uber, Uber is paying for my transport, subsidizing my transport, right? So they have capital which they can to acquire the customers, whereas the banks cannot, based on regulations, cannot pay or cannot do a cashback to acquire the customers. They can't go give you $200 to get you in as a customer. So they can't spend $500 million, let's say for a year, to acquire 100 million customers, which is impossible. They're not allowed.
Gotcha. Okay.
And their profit. Their main goal is profit, not spending. So
But do you
that's
think it's going to be like sustainable if like banks started spending a ton of money to like acquire
Exactly,
customers?
exactly. So what startups doing is they're spending a lot of money, acquire customers, and effectively sustain themselves and gain profit.
Okay, we're going to have Michael have the last word on this panel.
Okay, so basically from my perspective, this is why I talked to Francois. I said, look, my approach is a completely different approach, which is go in secretively. I mean, look what I've done in Thailand. I do CRM. I connect to almost 100% of all chain stores in Thailand. Every supermarket almost, in every hypermarket.
My new friend, man.
Yeah, and almost every single convenience store. And people think I do e-commerce as a business. So I have no idea why, but this is one of my part of my business. So if you can connect all that together in a digital way, why do you need even, hypothetically speaking, why do you even need a MasterCard Visa network? So obviously my approach is to help, exactly what Punnamas said, help the unbanked population and get someone like MasterCard or Visa buy me.
That was not subtle at all. It was like, buy me right now. The guy was like,
Not at all. So that's my final success. So buy me.
Your pitch is you're an acquirer.
Yeah, that's right. You can acquire me as well. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So time's up. I'm afraid I need to give the stage to the next panelist. So thank you so much for being on the panel today. Wish we had more time to like speak with you, but if anyone wants to catch them, I'm sure they'll be around and they'll be at the after party as well. Thank you, everyone. A big round of applause for our panel.